And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and what is Casual Commander? I have talked about this subject sort of off and on, obviously with my channel a lot. A lot of other content creators have talked about it. I thought I would actually make a video about what Casual Commander is and sort of tackle some of these issues that I've talked about a lot on this channel. I have sort of a different approach that I'm going to go about it though. First of all, I will just say there is no definitive answer. I know possibly asking this question, people will think that I will come to a definitive conclusion on what's casual and what's not. There really isn't. I mean, you can't nail it down. I actually thought it was interesting. Play to Win, a CEDH competitive channel, which typically plays CEDH games. I watched a video of theirs a while back where they actually decided to do something different and play a casual game. And because you have people that typically play competitive EDH playing a casual game, well, in order to do that, you have to set rules or else you're going to play the cards that you typically play. And they actually made a list of what they consider to be casual rules. I think it's really interesting to look at what a CEDH player would consider casual play. So if we look at their list, no loops, right? So in other words, no infinite loops. No I win definitely right now cards. Okay, that's interesting. No mana positive mana rocks, right? So a CEDH channel considers mana positive mana rocks to be not casual, except for Sol Ring though, of course, because it's Sol Ring. Although, as I've said many times before, only difference really between Sol Ring and a lot of those other mana positive mana rocks is the fact that it's cheap. No unconditional tutors under 3 mana. And of course, unconditional tutors means no restrictions, right? So a demonic tutor would be unconditional, right? Something like an enlightened tutor, I would probably say is a conditional tutor because you're only getting certain things. No free counter magic. So Force of Will, Pact of Negation, those are out. No off-color fetches. That's definitely an interesting one that I've heard people talk about from time to time. But probably the most interesting one, no card worth more than $100. That's it. They just put a limit on individual cards costing more than $100. So to me, that's a very interesting list. You know, I don't know how much Casual Commander these guys actually play, if any at all. I find it really fascinating for a group that typically plays CEDH all the time. What do they think a casual game is? And this is the list that they come up with. So in other words, a group that typically plays competitive EDH, if you're going to force them into a casual format, this is the list that they're going to use in order to do that. So I find that really fascinating. Do I agree with this list? I mean, I think it's pretty good. You know, if you were to give me this list and say, here's the list that we're going to follow for our casual commander games, I would be okay with it. I'm pretty sure I fall into all of these rules already with most of my decks. Likely have a few cards that are worth more than $100, but it wouldn't be hard to fix that one. The price issue, of course, is always a big one. And I made my prices video, and of course, there was lots of people commenting on both sides of the fence about it. No big surprise there. I find, as I said to my patrons recently, that price is the one thing that really gets people fired up. Like I say all the time, I'm more concerned with what your deck's doing than the individual cards you are using and whether or not you proxy one of those cards or not. I'm not saying I do it all the time, but I'm okay if someone else does. That's for each individual person to decide. Just like with what casual is. What casual is really hard to nail down. Whether or not you can set certain rules for it, I'm not sure. Always Rule Zero is going to help here with certain play groups deciding what's casual and what's not, or what's just okay in their play group. As I've mentioned several times before, I've come across play groups where they don't allow the color blue in their play group. Certainly the color blue, it can be casual, no question about that. And I will get more to that in a bit. But in your play group, if you decide you don't want something, that's an easy fix. But for the rest of us that don't have play groups, play online all the time, it can be a lot more difficult. And the opinions are all over the place. I always find it funny when I mention things like dual lands. Are they casual? And you'll have several people saying, well, of course they're casual. Why wouldn't they be? And then you see a couple more comments where people are talking about, of course, they're not casual. They're way too expensive or whatever the case may be. There's always completely opposing opinions on this. My tutors video, same thing. You have people saying absolutely tutors are a problem for the format and other people saying absolutely they are not. I think this is interesting. The unconditional tutors under 3 mana rule that Play to Win has, I think is definitely an interesting one that you could look at if you're trying to maybe hinder tutors a little bit in your play group. Ultimately, as I said in that video, you absolutely need tutors in the format. You know, the jank janky decks are going to be a lot better if they have tutors available to them to be doing the janky things that they want to be doing, right? So you definitely do need them in the format. It's just really interesting to me to see the completely opposing opinions that people have on what's casual and what's not, and how sure people are of themselves, right? Like, people make these statement of facts in the comments of this is absolutely not casual or this absolutely is casual. They're just not leaving anything for wiggle room at all. I'm pretty open-minded when it comes to these things. I definitely leave a lot of wiggle room for other people's opinions, but a lot of people make these statement of facts like they know what's casual and what's not, when really it's difficult to hammer down. And I'm going to give what I think is a perfect example of this, because again, rather than just actually trying to hammer down what's casual and what's not, in my videos, I like to have this as an open discussion where I give examples, and maybe the people that are so hardline on certain things being casual or not, maybe that gets them thinking about possibly changing their opinion on what is. So I'm going to look at a deck that I made for my patron recently, Taniwha. This is a patron deck that I did on my Patreon for my patron Nisus. He wanted a Taniwha deck. And by the way, if you're interested in joining my Patreon, the link is in the description below. Feel free to give it a click. So he wanted a Taniwha deck. Very interesting, really, really unique commander. 3 blue, Serpent 7/7. Has trample and has phasing. It is the only legendary creature that has phasing, so the only commander that has phasing. And as we all know, that means that on your untap, it phases in if it's phased out, and if it's already in play, it phases out, right? So it goes back and forth. So basically, you only get to use your Taniwha every other turn. But on top of that, at the beginning of your upkeep, all your lands phase out. Ouch. That is a really huge drawback. So that ability of at the beginning of your upkeep isn't going to happen on that first upkeep because your Taniwha is not in play, right? That ability is only going to trigger if your Taniwha is in play. So basically, whenever your commander is in play, your lands will not be. That's a huge drawback. However, to me, this is the epitome of commander, where I am taking a commander that has a really huge drawback, and not only am I building around it, but I'm taking advantage of it, which is what I love about this commander, and man, did I have a ton of fun building this deck. Why am I talking about this in this discussion, though? Well, first of all, this is a casual commander. I don't know if there's anyone out there that wouldn't consider this a casual commander. This is so casual. I mean, you can comment below if you don't think Taniwha is a casual commander. I can't imagine what argument you would have for it. The only argument you could have for it is how you build this deck. And how you build this deck is by taking advantage of the fact that, first of all, your commander's phasing out, but also your lands are phasing out. And as anyone who has built a Taniwha deck before or played against it knows, the best card in this deck is Sunder. 3 blue, instant, return all lands to their owners' hands. This is probably the best card in the deck. I mean, you could argue whether some other cards are. To me, I think this is the best one. This is the one that is going to give you the biggest advantage. Is Sunder a casual card? I guarantee you there's a lot of people out there that aren't going to love a Sunder in a casual game. Bouncing all lands, I mean, it's not necessarily an Armageddon, but it certainly is hating on lands. Again, the broad term of land hate just isn't casual at all. Basically excludes Sunder from a casual game, but yet Taniwha is certainly a casual commander, right? So for anyone who doesn't know, what happens here is basically my Taniwha phases in, and then my upkeep trigger goes on the stack, and all my lands are going to phase out. So I'm going to tap them all for mana in response. My lands phase out, and then I use all that mana to cast Sunder because it's an instant, so I can do it during my upkeep. And all my lands are phased out, so they're perfectly fine. All my opponent's lands get bounced to their hand. Huge advantage for me, right? Is that casual? Is that a casual play, right? I think it absolutely is. This deck absolutely is casual. Some of the other cards that I put in my patron's casual Taniwha deck: Land Equilibrium, 2 blue enchantment. If an opponent who controls at least as many lands as you would put a land onto the battlefield, that player instead puts a land onto the battlefield, then sacrifices a land. So if you have no lands in play, basically that means your opponents can't play lands. So this is definitely a card that I think people are going to look at and go, oh, that's not casual at all. But in this deck, I think it absolutely, I mean, it fits what you're doing, right? I'm building around my commander. I'm taking advantage of the fact that my lands are phased out. I don't see anything wrong with that. How about Mana Vortex? Casual card, 1 blue enchantment. When you cast this spell, counter it unless you sacrifice a land. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a land. If there are no lands on the battlefield, sacrifice Mana Vortex. So this makes everyone sacrifice a land on their upkeep. Obviously, because your lands are going to be phased out half the time, you're going to be sacrificing half as many lands as everyone else, right? How about Mana Breach? How about Overburden? These are cards that typically people hate seeing in a casual game, but are absolutely perfect in a Taniwha deck. So the reason I'm bringing this deck up is because it really focuses on the fundamental issue with nailing down what's casual and what's not. Taniwha is a casual commander, absolutely no question. A lot of the cards I named, are they casual? I think a lot of people would say that they are not. Pretty much attacking people's lands in general, a lot of people will have an issue with. But how else am I supposed to make my Taniwha deck a reasonably good deck, right? If I can't use any of those cards I just named, this deck's not going to be very good. It's going to suck. It's not going to be lots of fun to play. What do you do, right? So like I said, I'm not nailing down by any stretch of the imagination what's casual and what's not. I don't know if you could. Like I said, in your group, you could definitely have rules just like those play to win rules, which I actually really like a lot of those rules. But I just thought bringing up this Taniwha deck was a perfect example of what I was talking about. I play tested this deck. It's a ton of fun. I loved playing it. In fact, I might keep this deck for myself. I really like it a lot. It's doing a lot of things that people typically hate in a commander game, but it is definitely a casual commander, right? So what do you do? It's a tough one. I like making these videos to invoke discussion where people can look at the example that I give and go, maybe, I got to rethink my stance on what's casual and what's not, because this Taniwha deck, I would say, is definitely casual. Is there a definitive way we can decide what's casual or not? I don't think there is. Like I said, for me personally, land destruction and stacks are those things that in the beginning I hated and I didn't think were casual at all. And I've really come around on it a lot where now I'm mostly totally okay with it. But comment below what you think is casual and what's not. Are there any actual definitive things you can say? Is there definitive cards that aren't casual? Are there definitive rules that you can set that maybe 90% of commander players would agree with? I don't know if there is. It really is an eternal discussion, but I like adding to it. Again, I'm just invoking discussion here. I want to open people's mind to maybe some things that you thought weren't casual actually maybe are. That's the whole purpose of this video, but that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.